My full name is Eileen Mavis Thomas, born in 1924. Maternal grandfather was Walter Hughes Gallagher. He was born in 1871 on a property called Park Hill near Hamilton, and my grandmother, whose maiden name was Jeanie Fraser, and she was born at Balmoral, which is a little settlement outside Hamilton, and she was born in 1877. And my father and mother came off properties outside of Hamilton. My mother was Alvy Gallagher before she married my father, who was Martin Nolte, and they were married in 1923 in Hamilton, and I was born in 1924. I was the first daughter, and then there was the second daughter, Shirley, who was born in 5 years later, in 1929. Dad, at the insistence of his mother, put in an application to the government to buy a soldier settlement block. Dad did want to become or train to become a Lutheran minister, but his mother, who was a very stern, strong-willed woman, said no. All the Nolte men are farmers, and you will be a farmer. And I was born on that farm. And then through droughts and all sorts of things that happened to the stock, the farm went broke, and as a lot of farms did after the First World War, because the government only sold the dregs of land, of properties, and consequently a lot of the farms were non-productive. And so we moved into Hamilton, which was a town about 17 miles from where the farm was. And it's the centre of a very prosperous sheep and cattle grazing country. And there was some cropping, but it was mainly a sheep place, and there were some very wealthy graziers who lived on big properties there in and around Hamilton. So he took to shearing as a full-time job, and he would start shearing on the properties in North Queensland, and he would work his way right down the east coast, right through Victoria and over as far as Sojourner in South Australia. And as a consequence, he was away from home for about 9 or 10 months of the year, and I never really got to know my father. When I was about 3 and a half to 4, and that's where my sister was born after we moved into Hamilton. And I remember Mum telling me that when I was little, I used to go down and to the front gate and hang over the front gate, and the children from around the surrounding houses would come and talk to me and listen to me talk, because she said you had a very posh English voice, which made me laugh because things might have changed a bit since then. I was baptised into the Presbyterian church, and I used to go to Sunday school, and it was very, very difficult for Mum being on her own and through the Great Depression, and in those days it was very difficult to get money from the shearing sheds back to the homes in other states, and as a result there were times when we had no money at all. And fortunately one of Mum's sisters was married to a man who had money, and he used to help out. But she did tell me that there were several occasions when she was on the point of committing suicide because things were so bad. And she said, when I told you things like that, you would say to me, "Don't worry, Mummy, I'll look after you." And that's why we were always so close, because there was only the two of us for 5 years until my sister was born. At that time, my father came home once from Queensland, and he got a job as a linesman with the Postmaster General's Department, and so worked on telephone lines in and around Hamilton. But he was such a good shearer that the property owners around Hamilton still would call on him to blade shear their show and stud sheep. and so he never really got away from shoeing for a long time. Getting back to my mother's history, when she was 18 she left the property that her father, my grandfather, managed, and went and had a 6 months teachers training college in Ballarat, and then she was posted to a school that was yet to be built in a little sawmill settlement at Wye River was the name of the settlement. She went by train from Hamilton to a place called Dean's Marsh, and then she had to get off the train there, and the manager of the sawmill settlement met her on horseback with another horse, and he said, "I hope you can ride." When they got there, he took her to see where her school was. Her school, which was built by the sawmillers, was made of corrugated iron. It had a beaten earth floor, no flooring of any sort. There was a window cut out of the corrugated iron, and there was a doorway cut out of the corrugated iron, and that was her school. None of the children living there had ever had any schooling, so she was expected in this corrugated iron shed to teach children from 5 to 15, all in the one shed. But when Mum was down there, there was only a horse track round the cliff face, and they used to ride their horses to different little settlements for dances and various other functions. And the beach was just down the bottom of the cliff, which they found a place where they could clamber down the cliff onto the beach. But she collected some of the shells. Of course, no human foot had ever been on those beaches because there was no way of getting to them apart from slithering down the cliff face. So she had this wonderful collection of shells. But later on we lost those, and that was a tragedy because there were shells there that I'd never seen before and have never seen since. Fortunately, she was strong, strong-willed and strong physically, and she was able to cope. And she lived with the sawmill manager and his wife in their home, and had a wonderful 3 years there. When my father came back from World War I, Mum finished teaching at Wye River and went back to her home, and that's when they became officially engaged and were married in 1923. Lionel and I first met one another when we were still at school. I would have been 6 and he would have been 8, and even at 8 he was learning to play the trumpet. We knocked about with a group of teenagers, and one day the headmaster came into the commercial class teacher where I was having a class, and said that the manager of 3HA radio station, which was the Hamilton one, had rung up and said that he needed a stenographer. Well, I was lucky he recommended me. So anyway, I left school in the morning. In my school uniform, I went down and started work in the afternoon at 3HA, and I was there for 3 years. So I graduated from just being the stenographer to picking the musical programs, and then they were without a copywriter. So I ended up doing copywriting, that's the advertisements, and I never want to hear the word new floor polish again. That was the in thing, and I had to try and work out so many different ways of saying the same thing. So when they decided that at the studio that I should learn how to test microphones and things like that, I decided it was time I left. And then when war came, he joined the Air Force and I joined the Women's Army on my 18th birthday in 1942, and left home. I was trained as a cartographer and posted to the Survey Corps in Bendigo, and we were drawing or mapping the islands in the Pacific where the Australian and American troops were fighting, and learned a lot about that area of the world. Of course, it was a very top secret job because we knew where the war was going to move to, and so we had to just keep quiet about everything we did. We had barracks in Bendigo, and all the women's army girls were in barracks there, and we used to march to the headquarters of the Survey Corps there in Bendigo each morning to do our work with that company, and so I was a real country bumpkin. Of course, we used to have church parades, but it didn't. A lot of the people who were in the unit that I was in the army, they were atheists or agnostics, and they were a lot of arty people, artists, and they tend to have a different slant on life. And of course, all the city girls, they smoked and they drank, and I thought, oh, that's what you do when you turn 18 and join the army. I used to go in by train, by electric train, until another girl who was living at a suburb called Carnegie, which was between Oakley, where I was billeted, and Victoria Barracks. So we decided, out of our 2 and 6 a day, 25 cents military pay a day, we would each buy a push bike. And we used to ride them in from, I'd ride from Oakley, I'd pick her up at Carnegie, and we would ride the 20 miles into Victoria Barracks, round the old St Kilda junction, but it was 5 main streets all joined in together, and there were no signals, no traffic lights, no nothing, so you sorted yourselves out. And going round that intersection at about 10 to 9 in the morning with army convoys, horses, taxis, trucks, it was quite hair-raising. But most mornings the same tram would come round the bend at the same time and with the same driver, and when he would see this girl and I anyway coming round the St Kilda junction, he would ring the tram bell and wave to us, and so lucky we didn't get run over. When we joined the army, we joined for the duration of the war and 6 months after, and if there was any mopping up to be done or any finalising of equipment and positions and so forth. And then we had to take a discharge, and I didn't want to be discharged because I loved the army life, but I had no choice. But I loved my time in the army. Was discharged and went back to Hamilton. Went to work with Sir Reginald Ansett, and that's where I met up again with a Lionel King, whom I had known since we were children at school, and we eventually got engaged and were married in 1947, and that's when we met Frank, who became part of the band, or Lionel became part of Frank's group. There was Frank and his father, who played clarinet and saxophone, and Lionel, who played trumpet, and another friend who played drums, and they formed the Frank Thomas Rhythm Group. He used to play for dancers, in Hamilton and around the district, and that's how I first met Frank. But in those days, when Lionel and I were married, and Frank was just Frank who played the piano, and then we all went our separate ways. Frank became an agronomist with Monsanto, and we bought a run-down general store and post office down the bush near Ballarat, and worked like slaves for about 4 years there. And that's where Christopher, our son, was born in a place called Nerin. Christopher would have been the happiest baby I think I've ever seen. He was always laughing, and while we were having this general store and post office, we also had cats, lots of cats. And I remember one day I went out to the backyard under the walnut tree because I had him sitting in his pram there in the shade, and not only was Christopher in the pram, but there were umpteen kittens. How they got into the pram, I don't know, but there he was in this sea of kittens and laughing his head off, and they were all over him. And I thought that was absolutely wonderful. Lionel continued to play in the dance band with Frank, and they used to travel, all over the western part of Victoria, and he wouldn't get home until perhaps 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then he would sleep for most of the following day. And Bill was in charge of a railway gang, but he used to keep me company. We both loved music. I played the piano a bit, he played the banjo, and we very often would have a musical evening, or else we would play cards or just talk. And he was a great companion to me and to Christopher, who was a baby at that time. When Christopher was about 2, he went missing, and there were wide open paddocks everywhere, and I was frantic, and I ran across to the railway station where Bill was and said, "Christopher's lost." And he called all the maintenance gang in off the job, and they hunted and searched for Christopher, and of course they couldn't find him. I went back inside, absolutely frantic, into the kitchen, and behind the kitchen door it was a table, and sitting on the table was Christopher, with the contents of the medicine chest strewn all round on the kitchen table, and he had taken the lid off the bottle of olive oil and had poured it out and was sitting there in a bottle of olive oil looking absolutely angelic. And but that was the nature of the man Bill. He just dropped everything and went and searched for him, and then when they came back, having not been able to find him, but I had, he just stood there and looked at him and laughed. And we got closer and closer and shared a lot of, and sort of fell in love. And I realised that he was the man I could have and would have married, and we would have been, really happy. We would have had a wonderful life. And as a result of that knowledge, which he shared evidently, I became pregnant, and Robin is the result of that, and I would never have had it any different, because she is a wonderful Christian girl. She just looked like a little Robin when she was first born. She had these big dark eyes and jet black hair, and just had a sparky little look about her, and I thought straight away, you look like a Robin, and that's how she got her name. But she used to love to take the milk billy down to the front gate for the milkman to put milk in it and carry it back up to the house, which was in Ararat. When she was born, he was excited to know that he had a daughter, because he already had a son. But we knew that nothing would come of it, because he was already married as well, and his wife was very dependent on him. He would have been, or was, the love of my life. We eventually went our own ways with our own families. Then we sold it and moved to Ararat, The marriage folded in 1954 and I went back to Hamilton because my mother was in very bad health. She'd had a number of serious operations, and the children and I went back and lived there for quite a while. I got a job as a stenographer and clerk with the State Electricity Commission, and worked there for 3 years in Hamilton. And then I was offered a position as secretary to the manager of the Hamilton Base Hospital. So I took that and worked there for about 6 years, and then met up with another person who I thought was very nice, and we eventually got married in 1966 and moved from Hamilton to Ararat where we lived, but it was never a marriage in the true sense of the word, because he really didn't want a wife, and his 3 teenage daughters certainly didn't want a stepmother. That was a bad period in my life, because I had Robin with me. Christopher, my son, stayed with my mother in Hamilton because there wasn't room for him where we were living. And that was always a tragedy to me, because I felt then that I could have lost him, but in retrospect I would never willingly have done that. He's my dear son. I love him to bits, and I just regret that we were still living apart, but at least spiritually and emotionally and lovingly I believe that we have reconciled all those heartaches that went on when he was still younger, and he's hopefully forgiven me for leaving him behind. So anyway, at the end of three years, we decided that the marriage was a hopeless arrangement, and so separated, and I moved back to Hamilton again. In 1977, I took leave of absence and went on a 7 weeks tour to Europe, up through to Scotland, because my great-grandparents were both born in Edinburgh, and going up on the train and stepping out onto the platform at Princes Street Station was just like coming home. I felt an instant affinity with Scotland, and that was lovely, and that time was great. Later, when I came home from the UK, I re-met and married Ross Roper, whom I'd known for years prior to that. We married, and unfortunately, in about 7 or 8 years, he was a mad motorcycle fiend, sped. His friends told me later that he thought he had wings when he was on a motorbike, and he came off on a long sweeping bend and managed to kill himself. When Ross was killed in the accident, there was a knock on my front door, and these 2 young policemen, looking very anxious, were standing there. I knew immediately that something was dreadfully wrong, and I just said to myself, God, don't leave me. And I felt this feeling of warmth and peace just go right through my body, and that enabled, I knew God had spoken to me in that manner, and I was able to go through all the drama that followed an accident that resulted in a death. Anyway, that was a very sad and traumatic part of my life. I and Robin and Norm moved to Adelaide. I used to go over there and I would go to church with them. I got a whole new emotional feeling about God, and felt that helped me emotionally, and with a lot of the past hurts and unhappy situations that I'd been through. We would sometimes have a church service in a school hall, for example, and I would wonder why, when we walked into this gymnasium or hall, I would start to cry. And I thought, what's the matter with you? And I said that to Robin, and she said, that's God talking to you. So one year we went to the convention, and Reinhard Bonnke was the speaker, South African brilliant evangelist, used to preach to millions of Africans in huge marquees. And through him, I really came to know God on a different level altogether. And it was then, during that convention, that I gave my heart to the Lord and let Him control my life. And the weight of a lot of things was lifted off my shoulders. And so I have walked with God since then. That would have been about 1984 when I was baptised. After that, I took a trip to Germany with my son. It was a good trip, I enjoyed it. We went on a US Army clapped out bus from Frankfurt to Paris for the weekend, had a wonderful time, stayed in a half-star hotel in Paris, and went to the Folies Bergère and various other places, the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral and Notre Dame and Montmartre, and just had a lovely weekend in Paris. And then we came back to Australia, and it wasn't long before a friend of my first husband got in touch with me because he had heard about Ross's accident, and his wife had died of a heart attack just 12 months before that. And we met up again and just clicked. Although we had just been friends because we were both married when we were in our 20s. And we just clicked, and within a couple of months we decided to get married. And I believe that God sent Frank to me as a gift, because everything we did seemed to have been preordained. When we married, he wasn't a Christian, I was. And I had said that if I ever married again, it would have to be to someone who was a Christian. But God knew differently and had different plans, I believe. Frank was an outgoing personality. He was bright and cheerful, and he loved to travel. He loved music. Although he never had any really formal musical tuition, he had an innate ability of putting chords together that other musicians were amazed at. So there was always music in the house. He couldn't walk past the piano without sitting down. He might only play a couple of chords, but he would sit down and play these and then go on out through the music room door out to the backyard and do what he was going to do. He was a handyman. He could turn his hand virtually to anything. He built his own home, and even Rebecca, my younger granddaughter, had a clapped out old car, with the exhaust pipe wouldn't have passed any tests at all. She'd have been run off the road. So he repaired that with the aid of a jam tin, which he used as a sleeve to fix up the hole in the exhaust pipe. Frank was loved by my family, especially the girls, especially Beck, my younger granddaughter. She could be a bit radical about some things, and Frank could have opinions that came straight out of left field. And they used to have some great arguments, but they dearly loved one another. And I remember once Beck hanging around his neck and the head on his shoulder saying, "Frank, you're the only real grandfather I've ever had." And that brought him to tears because he was a very emotional person. But they had this closeness, and he and Norm got on like a house on fire because, as Robin would say, they both had their feet firmly planted in mid-air. They were always having these crackpot ideas of what they could do and how they could change the world. And Robin loved Frank too. He was a father figure to her, and of course he always loved music, and they loved music. Norm and Robin loved dancing, and of course Frank could play the piano till the cows came home, and we had some lovely times. And in 2000 we decided to make the big trip right up through the centre of Australia to Darwin, down the west coast and back across the Nullarbor. But he developed a cough before we did all that. I said to him, I think we'd better go and see about this cough, get a chest x-ray. So we did that, and 3 days later their doctor came and said, well, never mind about the cough. He said, have a look at this, and it was a cancerous tumour at the base of his right lung. So that meant surgery. We had to go to Geelong for treatment at the cancer centre there. And it was only God that got me through that whole period. They operated, and the surgeon said, well, we've got the tumour, everything's okay, you can go out and enjoy the rest of your life. Well, 5 weeks later, we went on our last caravan trip to Queensland, and while we were in Noosa, he developed this cough again, and I said, I think we better attend to this, and so we went and saw a doctor here in Noosa, and he did the chest x-ray, and he came back to me and he said, when are you going back home? And I knew immediately that something was wrong. And as I said, it was only God that got me through all the rest of the 15-month rearguard battle that we had against it, but eventually he succumbed to the cancer, and that was the end of a lovely time in my life. But I knew that God had, I knew innately that God had just loaned him to me, so I didn't grieve. I thought my time of loaning had expired, and that through being together he had become a Christian, and a good one at that, and ended up as the music leader of the music team in the Pentecostal church that we attended. I was one of the music leaders, and so that was a very happy time in our marriage, and we had a lovely marriage for about 11 years, and that was the happiest of my marriages. And he had said that if I thought I could, he would like me, after he died, to come to Queensland to be closer to Robin and Norm, because they were like children to him. They had a very, very lovely relationship. Why would anyone believe in God? God answers your prayers in his way, not necessarily the way you want him to answer or would expect him to answer, but he will speak to you in different ways, by events, by emotions. You may even hear this soft voice and you wonder where it's coming from. One day when we were out on the river in an O-boat, I became aware that something had said to me, this is where you are going to live. And I thought, did I make this up, or is that God talking to me? So, and I thought, well, should I say anything to Robin or shouldn't I? And I thought, no, I've got to speak to her because that's what I believe I have just heard. And so when I told her what had just transpired, she said, that was God telling you that you were going to live here. And so I settled for about 6 weeks with Norm and Robin till I found accommodation. And so I have lived here ever since, very happily. I've never regretted the move. I've never missed Hamilton where I lived. I had made more friends up here than I had in Hamilton because people who come here seem to be more outgoing. The only thing I miss is the smell of the Southern Ocean coming straight up from Antarctica, the strong smell of salt in the seawater and the smell of seaweed and kelp, but that's the only thing I miss. If I hadn't had Robin, I possibly would not have become a Christian. She has been a wonderful inspiration to me. I love her dearly. She's such a profound Christian and with so much common sense that it was just been a revolution. Why did God give that child to me? Because, you know, I can come to her with all my problems and get such sensible answers, Christian sensible answers, that, you know, she's a God-given child, and if it hadn't been for my relationship with Bill, I would never have had her, and my life would have been so much less, and so would the lives of a lot of other people that she has been part of. Yes, I just want Christopher to know that he's always been in my heart. I've always loved him dearly. He was my first child. I know that you are not a believer, Christopher, but God loves you and he will always be with you, and you just have to put your trust in him, and he will look after you the same as he's looked after me. So don't be afraid to give your heart to the Lord, because he will look after it like no one else can. I love you. I talk to God frequently, daily, perhaps several times a day, with my problems. I tell him that I know that I'm coming home to be with him, but I don't know that I'm ready yet. I'm sure that he's got more for me to do. What it is, I don't know, but he will show me in his good time. Just let my life flow in whatever he wants of me. He will tell me what he wants me to do, where he wants me to be, and I just rest in that knowledge, and I don't worry too much. I know my life will come to an end in the not too distant future because I'm 92, but I know where I'm going, and I know that he will take me home to be in heaven with him when he's good and ready, and not when I feel that it's time. So I'm quite relaxed about when I go home to the Father, and anything else in between is just time in the waiting room.